everyone, Warren here. Today we are in Marietta, Georgia, my hometown, and we're going to be exploring the Marietta History Center, which is a museum right off of downtown Marietta, also known as the Square because of its shape. So thank you for watching this one, and hope you'll join me for a visit to the Marietta History Center. Now, before we go into the museum, we do have this display out here of the 1916 Glover Machine Works locomotive. Just like all of the other towns in Georgia and most other small towns, it is built right along the train tracks, and they are still active. You can probably see them in the background there, and we'll have to cross them to get over to the museum. But this is always a neat free exhibit that's outside. And you'll see on the other side over there, you got the Marietta Welcome Center. So it's all kind of together here. And of course, Glover is also the name of the park. I mentioned the Square in Marietta. The park in the middle is Glover Park. So, obviously the two are related here. And I gotta be honest, I love seeing historical displays and all that, but I could not write a book, so I apologize that I can't give you a ton of information right here, but from my brain, let's put it that way. But thankfully we do have signs like this. So this locomotive was built by Glover Machine Works in Marietta in 1916. And was sold to a company in Virginia for hauling lumber. And then it came back home in 1921 and was restored in 1992. And now I will come back and give everybody a proper tour of Marietta. Probably when it's not such a gray January day like today. It's a little chilly. But here we are crossing over the train tracks, and we do have two sets of them here. So we make our way over to the History Center. We've got this nice mural here. And then we do have, as I said earlier, the Marietta Welcome Center. Now, a little trick for everybody: if you are coming to town for an event, they have them pretty much every weekend here, whether it's an artist market or a farmer's market or a full-on festival. The nice restrooms are in the Welcome Center. You do have porta potties, but go to the Welcome Center. And right outside the History Center, came across this interesting sculpture here. It's called the Teal Bunny. And it's by Jeffrey, here, I'll show you the information. Jeffrey Brewer, out of Steel and Enamel. So presented by the Marietta Arts Council. And definitely see the bunny in this. Now, the History Center itself is in what's known as the Kennesaw House, which is a historical site in a very old building itself. And of course, we do have some information here. And this functioned as a hotel in antebellum days, meaning pre-Civil War days. There was a summer resort for planters attracted by social activities of the town. And this is where federal raiders met to begin the locomotive chase that we talked about when we were in downtown Kennesaw. And of course, we will get to that, the Southern Museum in Kennesaw, to learn a little bit more about the locomotive chase. But of course, there's tons of great films out there you can watch on that. That'll probably do a better job than I can explaining it. And we have some more information on the Kennesaw House here. But it's cold out here. Let's go inside. All right, so here we are inside. So let's see, this was Henry Cole's bachelor furniture. And then over here, we have, let's see, a whole lot of great displays here. So this looks like, yep, this was the pieces from the courthouse. Have a robe there. Then over here we have some vintage kitchen and household appliances. I like this old washing machine. Of course, you know, with the amount we wash, we'd end up getting soap and water everywhere. Then here's an old ice box. This is a North Pole ice box. Of course, you put a large block of ice in there. Over here you have a little bit, you know, of an updated refrigerator from an ice box. And this talks about how the World War II affected Cobb County women and children. And we got this American Stove Company Magic Chef stove right here. I say, I like this metal ice cube tray. Oh, and then you got some propaganda posters featuring, we have one featuring Mickey Mouse here about saving scrap metal and rubber and paper, all the stuff that could be used for the war effort. And then encouraging you to car share. When you ride alone, you ride with Hitler. So, you know, if only they had ads like that today to encourage carpooling, I think might be more popular. And the rationing means a fair share for all of us. So, of course, rationing during the war to make sure we had everything we needed. Right, then this next room, we have lots of old outfits. Let's see, we have the lap desk of the Vice President of the Confederacy, Alexander Hamilton Stevens. Yeah, pretty cool. We have some Confederate buttons. Of course, they meant different things within the ranks. And then we have a federal officer's uniform. Let's see, the typical Civil War era U.S. infantry captain's nine-button lining in the body and sleeves, tied at the waist with a red sash. And then over here, we have a Georgia Military Institute uniform, Powder Spring Street, of course, Marietta, Georgia, from 1851 to 1864. And then we have lots of, including more buttons and a breastplate. We have more of these. They were in the other case over there, but carved bullets. And what it says is much of the soldiers' time was spent waiting for the next battle. Helped pass the time, they carved soft lead bullets in the different shapes. And of course, no two are the same. We have a Union Army hobo knife and fork kit. I could actually see that coming in handy for backpacking. We have some old poker chips there. An underwear button made of bone. All sorts of clothing items and things that were made out of necessity during the Civil War. And of course we have some uniforms. This is Nurse Emma Stevenson. She was an African-American nurse assigned to the 17th Army Corps of the U.S. Army. Died from illness while in service in Marietta. And then, you know, when you're in school and you learn about the Civil War, you learn about how, you know, the best doctors during the Civil War were the ones that could remove injured appendages the fastest. This is the kit that did that. You can see right here it says what each of these was for. So the big one there was for large bones. The one at twist was for the skull saw. Then he got this little hatchet here. It says it was for toes and fingers. And then you have other amputation knives as well as a tourniquet there. The big tweezers there, it says that's a bullet extractor. I'm glad we advanced from that. And this looks to be other medical tools here. See, this flame was used for bloodletting, which was used for every medical condition from 500 BC to the late 17th century. And, you know, I just knew that. You know, I totally didn't read that anywhere. And let's see, this bullet right here says was carved in it. Let's see, we have a excavator, which was, or an evacuator, excuse me, that cleaned wounds and drew excess blood. This was a tooth key. This is used to pull teeth. It was the first method in 1742. I just had a root canal, so I'm glad, again, glad things have changed. And then here we have some Civil War swords. They're always very cool to see. We have some cannonballs and large shells back here with different projectiles. And you can actually see a split open version right there of a shell. And then right here, so the name of this exhibit is Weapons of Local Destruction, and I think those would definitely do their job there. We have some Confederate guns and rifles. Some examples of the cannons in the area, and actually a diagram of one, and you can actually see some full-size cannons. Not sure if they have any here. We'll find that out. But I know Kennesaw Mountain, which is nearby, and we'll go there one day too. They also have them. All right, we're getting into World War I here. See some of the weaponry from that war. More World War I uniforms here. And then this is really cool. This whole setup here. Let's see, it says this is an MG42 and a Browning M1919, as well as a British Bren from World, and we're getting into World War II here. And of course, when you get into the transition to World War II, you get into Germany at the time, and of course, you know, their flag and imagery. Now, we're gonna take a time out from history and nerd out here real quick. This gun right here, this Walter P38 pistol, for Transformer fans, that is Megatron. Generation 1 Megatron, that is the gun that the original toy is based on, and for his alt mode, and you know, looking at it right here, I can see why Hasbro can't make that toy anymore. It is very similar, albeit just a hair smaller than the real thing. Okay, nerd time over. So here we are with more World War II uniforms, and we have an aviator's. This is a Japanese fighter pilot aviator hat and goggles. And of course we have a Pearl Harbor piece of artwork there. Right here, now this is pretty neat to see. Of course, massively destructive, and an M2 flamethrower. Of course, all sorts of horrible things happen in World War II. And this talks about the military installations in Georgia. And then we start talking about the bomb, the fallout shelters, and mutual assured destruction. And of course, this getting into the Cold War, which, you know, was a scary time. And this is the Korean War. I like that model here, the Russian MiG-15. And this here, yep, that is a bazooka. Look at the size of that thing. And we got Vietnam. And it looks like, yep, we have an anti-tank weapon here, a rocket launcher. Desert Storm. And we have Operation Iraqi Freedom. Then we have a rather large exhibit on guns. You can see the History Channel here. Even has a sign talked about how the gun has played a crucial role in history. An invention which has been praised and denounced, serves hero and villain alike, and carries with it moral responsibility. To understand the gun is to better understand history. Then we'll do a walk by of all the guns here. And then mixing, we have some more Civil War artifacts, including a coffee pot, an ale bottle. Here, maybe we can see that. There we go, that's better. Not as much glare. And then we have this thing called a housewife. It says it's a accessory item to store pins, needles, buttons, and small pieces of cloth. So it was used to mend clothing while far from home, hence the name. Got a drinking cup and a canteen. And then this arch-looking thing, it says it's Sherman's hairpin. It was a section of Civil War T-rail used on the main line of the Western and Atlantic Railway. State-owned railway running from Chattanooga to Atlanta. This short section of rail was heated and bent around a tree to render it useless. And we're back into the guns here. And this is neat. This is a communication. This is what they called the American Indian, World War II code talkers. So this is what they would use to communicate in code. And we're back into some of the more handheld guns. I always found these really tiny guns to be interesting. And then back over here, we missed this on our first walk around. So this is the M60, some larger guns and weapons. The SG-43, even has some bullets loaded there. I'd hate to be on the wrong end of any of these. And then right here we have the missing man table, which you'll see this in a lot of restaurants that either, of course, have special connections to those in the military or around Memorial Day or Veterans Day. And it's, of course, set for those who are either missing in action or no longer with us. All right, we have a little bit of history of public phones. There's an old phone booth and a switchboard. Then over here, we have the coal burning stove from 1900 to 1920s, used to heat homes. And then we come to what is my favorite exhibit here. And I've seen this before. This is an entire display, an exhibit on scouting in Georgia. Of course, scouting being a very big part of my life. Try to do this exhibit justice here. So we have a whole display. Those are all different neckerchief slides. And for those not familiar, a neckerchief is the scarf that goes around a uniform, just like that yellow and blue one on that uniform. So it looks like a lot of these were probably hand carved. Let me zoom in a little. You got one from Philmont, which is a scouting high adventure base, the scout sign. DOA, which is the Order of the Arrow, the National Scouting Society. You have one, I really like this one. This one is a severed finger, pretzel, birdhouse, some animals there, very cool. And then we have some vintage uniforms here. So this is the 1960s leader uniform. Again, this is when, and again, it was just up until recently, we went by Boy Scouts of America instead of Scouting America. So you'll still see most uniforms still have the original name on them. This is a little bit more unique here. Sea Explorers or Sea Scouts is another branch of the scouting program. As the name suggests, it is, has a lot to do with being on ships and exploring the sea. And then we have a old vintage, no, that's the same thing, but a 1960s Cub Scout uniform. Looks to be a lot more heavy duty, almost like a denim type material or canvas when you look closely. So very neat to see. And then, let's see, we have some other uniform parts there. You have the Sea Scouts hat, you have an Eagle Scout medal, which of course is the highest honor you can earn in the Scouting America program. You have a neckerchief there. There's an Order of the Arrow sash. Let's see, we actually have some old registration cards there. And we have some dog tags there. Now, I don't believe those are standard issue. It looks to be maybe a more optional part or some sort of memorabilia. If we go down here, we do have a 1960s Cub Scout uniform hat, as well as some old merit badge pamphlets. Now, of course they don't look like this, but merit badge pamphlets are still available. But most of it's even online now, so the whole concept of these pamphlets is kind of going away. And then we have, I'm not quite sure, I don't see a sign for this, but yeah, this is Troop 277, it says Rambo. It almost looks like a sled, or maybe an old brace or bracket for a backpack of some kind. Whatever, regardless, it is very cool. It looks like you have some homemade checkerboards down here, some other games, and then you do have a display, and I appreciate this. You have the 5 areas of scouting where it talks about Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, Sea Scouts, Order of the Arrow, and of course Venture Scouting. Now we have a 1970s canteen. You have the an old mile swim card, and I like this. You actually used to have a whole line of Scout action figures that were put out by Kenner. They're kind of in that Mego style, where they have, the real cloth clothes. This one's from 1974, Scout Steve. And I know they actually had play sets and everything, but if you just look at the detail, you have the neckerchief, you have a rank badge, Very, very cool. Then over here, let's see, you have 1930s campaign, or this calls it a smoky hat. And then you have a dedication plaque for this display from 2009. Down here, you have another Cub Scout artifact. This was a wooden game chest made by Den 2 around 1960, and that's probably where these board games were from. Then you got some bottle caps there. I'm sure were used for several games. And then up here you have some vintage merit badge sashes. And if you look closely, you'll see Burt Adams camp staff. That is one of the two main camps here in the Atlanta Area Council. We have Burt Adams, we have Woodruff, and then we have a smaller camp where they don't do summer camp called the Allatoona Aquatic Space off of Lake Allatoona. And then this is a display on Marietta Troop Number 2 from 1912. It says they were formed in 1911, less than a year after the founding of BSA in 1910. And even though it's the first troop in Marietta, it was called Number 2 to distinguish it from Troop Number 1 in nearby Elizabeth. This was taken in front of the old post office, which is now the Cobb Museum, Marietta and Cobb Museum of Art. And then it lists the scouts' names there. Now, if you're on the other side, of course, you know, Scouting America / Boy Scouts does permit female members now. So it's more of a unified program, but you do have the Girl Scouts as well. And they have some of their historical artifacts here and vintage uniforms and books. Now, I was never involved as a parent with the Girl Scouts, so I don't know as much to tell you about, but you do have some dolls there. And it's also very nice to have them represented. Over here, we have some really neat looking totem poles. This is the Livingston's family totem pole. So it looks like they did this as a way to represent their family while also honoring Native American culture. And then turning back around, we got really sidetracked by the scouts here, but we have some, let's see, this looks like some vintage hairdressing equipment. And this is an X-ray shoe fitter. Now this is interesting. It says it was used from the 1930s to 1950s. And so this was a gimmick that would let parents and children and salesmen view an X-ray image of your feet. And it looks like it was banned in the 1950s due to radiation hazards. But this machine here, of course, is safe. But so what you would do is you look through this hole, and while you're looking in there, you would stick your feet through these holes and you'd be able to see what would make a good fit for a shoe. I don't know about that. I got really messed up feet. I don't know if that would would even help me. And we have a display on the Rotary Club. This looks like, yep, some medical equipment. That's a baby scale. And this was a doctor's bag used for making house calls. And then down here, I don't think I see an actual label. Oh, there it is. These were optical lenses for, of course, fitting those individuals who need glasses like myself. And in here we got all sorts of other medical equipment, including a delivery hook. All sorts of syringes. Whew. Like I said before, I'm glad we've made advances. And then this is on printing over here. So we have a small printing press. This was a 1919 Brantgen and Klug. So world's first automatic vacuum feeder for printing presses. 1931, the first practical automatic vacuum feed plant and printing process was produced by these individuals. So very neat. And of course, this is more about the Cox Printing Company, which, you know, Cox is a rather large company in Georgia, both printing and digital and all sorts of content. And then we have a display on the Brumby rocker, which is, of course, unique to Marietta and the Brumby Chair Company. And then over here, see, we have the McNeil Marble and Georgia Marble Company. Of course, you know, one of the things that's used for is headstones. And then we have some vintage cornmeal and pancake mix packaging, which is from J.D. Perkerson's Sons. Looks like they were based out of Austell, Georgia, which of course is not very far from here. We have this giant wheel, which is from the Glover Machine Works, and of course we talked about them when we saw the train outside. And it looks like we have a bigger display on Glover Machine Works. And then down this way, we have Bell Aircrafts. This is a really cool model here. So you have this giant plane, and you see where it's transporting all these vehicles. So this is a C5 model aircraft, and it's showing how the plane could be used for commercial use. And we have some models of aircraft that were produced from the Marietta Lockheed Martin plant, which is a huge operation here in Marietta. And it looks like we have a jacket and a model for the Hercules, which was the flight line coat was worn by an unknown Lockheed employee when the first C-130 was rolled out to the viewing public in 1954. And then you get into some more local artifacts. And one of the big things here, if you've never heard of it, is the Big Chicken. The Big Chicken, as the name suggests, is a giant chicken. It's not on the Marietta Square, but it's also not far. It is a KFC, or Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant, though it did not start out that way. And speaking of the Big Chicken, here is a model of what it looks like. And when you're in Marietta, if you're trying to give someone directions, usually that's your landmark. And what I was showing up here is actually a board game based on the Big Chicken. And then this is archaeology in the area, finding, of course, a lot of Native American artifacts. Here's some arrowheads and pottery that were uncovered. As well as some other artifacts here. And then we have a railroad display. All sorts of cool models. And again, in this area of Georgia, railroad history is big. Then down here, this is cool. This is one of the, if you can see in that picture there, this is a steam engine that you could actually ride on. It was that powerful, probably still is. Don't know if it would hold me, but very cool. And you can see where you would sit and, of course, attach cars to this engine here. We have some photos of some notable train wrecks that occurred. This is a map of gold in Georgia. Of course, talking about the gold rush. And of course, we have a display on the Trail of Tears, which was not the greatest time in our history. This is a picnic setup. See, on the grounds to celebrate the Federal Memorial Day in 1899. I thought that was a real person over there. So we have some information in a display on the Great Locomotive Chase, which, again, we'll go to the other museum at some point, but this is where the Texas and the General, I don't want to say duked it out, but basically chased each other. And definitely one of the more interesting stories of the Civil War. And like I said, several films have been made, and historical and scripted. All right, so here's a display on the Kennesaw House Hotel, which is the building we are in. Some artifacts from that time. We have the account book and ledger, some books that were available, and some bed sheets. And we have these elaborate candle holders over here. Almost look like mini chandeliers. And then we do have a photo of the Kennesaw House, which doesn't look too different from the outside of the building right now. Of course, it has been modernized for, current codes and such. And then we have another diorama or display on the Great Locomotive Chase with the General and the Texas. If you've ever been to Six Flags Over Georgia, they do have two train engines, both named the General and the Texas even. So, like I said, if you're not up on that story, I would definitely either watch a movie or read a book, look it up online. So this is a display on the Medal of Honor for Lieutenant General Arthur MacArthur Jr., 24th Wisconsin Volunteer Infantry, fought in Marietta at the Battle of Cheatham Hill in 1864, and was the father of General Douglas MacArthur. And it notes that they are the only father-son recipients of the Medal of Honor in U.S. history. So that is something to see there. And this gentleman peeking out the window was James Andrews. He was a leader of a group of spies that was described by author and historian Russ Bonds as wearing dark slacks and a vest under a black Prince Albert coat. So of course you can see him here spying out the window. Of course, we got this old bed that was what they call a rope bed. So they were slat beds. The ropes could not be pulled tight on the bed as the mattress would sag. Oh, and right here. So this is something I say to my kids every night. This is interesting. Have you ever heard the expression, sleep tight, don't let the bed bugs bite? This was a common 19th century expression related to the tight rope beds and mattress fillings. The mattresses were often filled with things like cotton, corn husk, straw, animal hair, and feathers that attracted bugs. These bugs would crawl inside the mattresses and would often bite people sleeping. So there's the bed bugs. And with the ropes being pulled tight so the mattress didn't slack, that's sleep tight. So interesting. Now the kids will know what I'm talking about. Well, now I'll know what I'm talking about when I say that to them. And I walked right by this. This is the original wall here. You can see right here kind of a display where it's talking about the different layers. But here it is. Here you have an aerial view of Marietta. Looks like this was around 1996. Of course, you have the square there. And the big chicken is more down that way. We have this vintage piano here. It says it's a 1880 Cranach and Bach square grand piano. It was donated to the History Center in 2019 from the Giles family. And we have a vintage phonograph from 1905. I always thought these looked cool. And then a 1920 record player. It looks like we have another. This is a 1950s record player turntable here. This is the gift shop. Currently have a train going by. This rather large dollhouse in here, which is very impressive. And of course, you got big chicken beanies here. Still got the train going here. It is flying. All right, so that was the Marietta History Museum. I hope you enjoyed. As you can tell, there's a lot to see in there. When I upload this, it'll probably be my longest video to date, for good reason. We saw lots of artifacts in there, artifacts showing how people lived through the different decades. We saw memorabilia and artifacts from different wars, including Civil War, World War I and II, and beyond. We, of course, saw local businesses being featured that were here historically, even to this day. We saw Megatron in there, the original alt form or alt mode for Megatron, which is neat to see because, you know, it's like something that was animated, a toy, you know, you actually get to see in person. Then, of course, my favorite display is the one on scouting in there, because I think scouting often gets overlooked, and you know, some people focus on the negatives or what they like or dislike about, or what they dislike about the program, and they forget how historical and how essentially, you know, scouts are good guys, boys and girls. So anyways, really hope you liked this video as much as I did making it. If you did, it would help me out a lot if you click like on the video. And of course, you can subscribe to the Peach State Prime channel for additional videos that are made in the future. That way you do get alerts for them. And with that, I hope you'll have a great day. God bless, and thank you for watching.